Valley of Humiliation. So we've gone through some cool pictures so far, where we've looked at the hill, we've looked at the cross, we've met a couple of different people. The next couple lessons are going to be visual. They're going to be pictures that are going to be explaining a lot of things. So, and then we'll get back into a little bit more dialogue as we go from there. So, the Valley of Humiliation. Let's go ahead and jump in. As we were just in the palace, beautiful. He got equipped with the armor. He was taught from the different pages of Scripture. He got all those different lessons that he wanted to go, and then he said, all right, I'm ready to go. And they said, well, one more day. And remember, they had to hold him back a little bit. And then they showed him a picture of what it's going to be like in the end. So now he's ready to go. Then he began to go forward, but discretion, piety, charity, and prudence would accompany him down to the foot of the hill. So they went on together, reiterating their former discourses till they came to go down the hill. Then said Christian, as it was difficult coming up, so far as I can see, it is dangerous going down. Yes, said Prudence, so it is, for it is a hard matter for a man to go down into the valley of humiliation, as thou art now, and to catch no slip by the way. Therefore, said they, are we come out to accompany thee down the hill. So he began to go down, but very warily, yet he caught a slip or two. So he thinks his training is done, and so he's ready to keep going. Now, as he begins, discretion, piety, charity, and prudence all walk with him. Now, what would that indicate in an allegory? When all those people or all those characters or those qualities are walking with you, what would that tell you? Huh?
You should
right.
be in possession of them at that stage.
Yeah, that's good, right? So as he's gone through the palace beautiful and taken those lessons, guess what he's added to his character? Discretion, piety, charity, and so on. So that's the beauty of what's gone through. He's matured, he's grown, he now has these qualities about him. Now, don't stretch the allegory too much because they're going to leave him, but for a different reason. We'll talk about that in a second. Okay? Now, as he's going down, for whatever reason now, as he goes forward on the path is going to lead into the Valley of Humiliation. Okay? And now this isn't humiliation like ridicule. That's the way we use the word. This is humiliation as in the term humility. So he's being led into a valley of humility. Now, what would that teach him? What do you think that valley is supposed to represent?
The humbling nature of trials.
Okay? The humbling nature of trials. What do you think Christian is supposed to learn, one way or another? Humility, that's the easy answer, but what does that mean?
To rely on God.
Right, because?
Because you can't rely on yourself.
Yeah, that's pretty much it, right? To rely on God because you can't rely on yourself. That's humility. Humility is realizing not that you're a worm. That's actually not humility. Humility, true humility, is to realize who you are, is to accept who you are, how limited you are, on how powerful you are, what you're good at and what you're not good at. Humility is not telling everyone that you're the worst person on the planet. Humility is not telling anyone that you have no talents or abilities, both of which are lies. Okay? Humility is accepting that God made you a certain way. He's given you certain abilities, and He's also limited you in other ways. You need help. You need people. You need Him most of all. So that's humility. So as he's going down in this valley, the key lesson he's going to learn is really just how strong he is compared to how strong he thinks he is. That's the key with humility. So that's what he's going to go into. But on the way down, now he's following he catches a couple slips as he goes down. So the idea being, as he's descending into humility, guess what's going to speed up his pace down the hill? A couple of good trips, a couple of good falls, a couple of screw-ups, a couple of falling on your face and having to get up and dig the gravel out of your mouth. That's what's happening to him. So as he goes down into this valley. Okay, we can keep going. Then I saw in my dream that these good companions, when Christian was gone to the bottom of the hill, gave him a loaf of bread, a bottle of wine, and a cluster of raisins, and then he went on his way. Now, the picture there is not that he lost all those characteristics. That's not what he's trying to say. In the allegory, as he goes through the Valley of Humiliation, guess how many companions he gets to go with? 0. This is a battle for him and him alone. So he's got to go through it. So he's got these new qualities. We saw that at the beginning. As they accompanied him, he's now added these qualities to his character. But as the allegory continues, the idea now being he's got to walk through this solitary place alone. Okay? But now in this valley of humiliation, poor Christian was hard put to it, for he had gone but a little way before he espied a foul fiend coming over the field to meet him. His name is Apollyon. Now, Apollyon means destroyer. Okay, it's taken from Revelation 9. It's the angel of the bottomless pit. It has a lot of connotations in Revelation. The idea being, this is one whose not so subtle goal is to destroy everything that God has created. Right? That's what his goal is. That's what his desire is. He is the opposite of God in almost every way. Right? He's not Satan per se, but he is representative of Satan's power or Satan's schemes. He's obviously in league with everything that is an enemy of God. So as Christians coming into this valley, guess who he's going to meet? Well, Apollyon. Now, what is that? What would you think that Bunyan's trying to picture in real life? That's our allegory, but what's the situation he's trying to picture?
James says that the devil prowls on like a roaring lion, teaching us his power.
Okay.
And so, as the Christian walks through life, there will be not just resistance from within, Ben, but there's also resistance from within.
Good. Yes, so there's a real demonic presence in the world, right? Now, is Bunyan trying to say that every Christian will have some battle with Satan or Satan's minions at some point in their life? I guess it's possible, but I don't think that's what he's trying to communicate. I think what he is trying to communicate in this point is in the Valley of Humiliation, Christian's going to come face to face with his own limitations. Like Michael said, the battle with himself is one thing. The battle with the world around him is also just as real and just as present. So he's got to deal with these difficult trials, these temptations that are going to press in upon him. And they're going to be, in one way or another, Satan's devices. You're going to deal with this world. You are going to deal with his schemes. You have to. And you're going to have to face them. And they're going to come hard, and they're going to become very real. Now, but think about this. This is important. As Christians walking, he's on a path, right? We can't forget, everywhere a Christian goes, he's not just wandering. There is a path put down for him to follow. Now, do you think it's random that Apollyon is in this place, knowing exactly where Christian's going to be? No, it's not random. How would he know where Christian's going to be?
There's a path.
Well, there you go. It's not that complicated, is it? Right? If I want to catch a taxi, where would I go? I would go find the street. Right? Unless I guess it's Uber anymore. That's a bad example anymore. But the point being, I would go to the place where I can catch what I'm looking for. Apollyon knows exactly where Christian's going to go at some point. And so he just sits there on the path waiting for him. Right? So this isn't a chance encounter. This is exactly what God has intended. God knows that this path is wide open. He knows that this is a place where Apollyon can camp, where he can seek out Christians, where he can accost them as they come by. So what does that tell you about this path, about Apollyon, about the way that Christian's going, and about the way God sees it?
Outside of God's control.
Right. Was God surprised that, I just put the path there, I didn't realize what was going to happen? Of course not. He knows exactly what's going to happen. MacArthur says this. John MacArthur says, Satan and his demons never act against God's people without the permission of God. And when God gives them permission, he always uses their work to accomplish some divine purpose. Often to exalt the power of God and prove the devotion of his followers, God permits Satan to work the hardest on the noblest servants of God. So, as we're going through this, understand that this is exactly how God planned it. Okay? Christian is to come face to face with this world. He is to come face to face with temptations. He is to come face to face with his own limitedness, his own failings. Everything's going to come at him in the form of fiery darts that he's got to defend himself against. And that's exactly what it's going to picture. And we all have to deal with that. It is this instructive, I thought it was an instructive quote from Timothy Warner. Our Western worldview gets involved here once again. We have a strong tendency to want to analyze everything and place the parts in neat, mutually exclusive categories. So we ask questions like, how do I know whether it is the world, the flesh, or the devil? My response is that most situations will involve some of each element to some extent. They are treated as working together so closely that you cannot talk about one without talking about the other. The flesh is the earthly qualities about which enable us to respond to the temptation. The world is the milieu in which we live and which is under the control of the ruler of the kingdom of the air. Satan and his demons know what fleshly parts of us are especially vulnerable, and they use the stimuli of the world around us to arouse sinful thoughts in us. The devil would be a fool not to try to take advantage of the world and the flesh in his aim to destroy us. So understand, the picture is not just literally demonic spiritual warfare. This is the world system coming at Christian. Okay? Then did Christian begin to be afraid and to cast in his mind whether to go back or to stand his ground. But he considered again that he had no armor for his back, and therefore thought that to turn the back to him might give him the greater advantage, with ease to pierce him with his darts. Therefore he resolved to venture and stand his ground, for thought he, had I no more in mine eye than the saving of my life, it would be the best way to stand. All right, so Apollyon's frightening. So what does Christian do? Well, Christian's faced with this battle. Okay, it's a battle that we were going to hit more than once. What's the obvious question that you have to ask every time you hit a trial?
Trust God or trust myself, or in the context, run away or continue the path.
Do I still want to believe this or not? Is this worthwhile? Do I really believe enough? Because think about it. If you weren't here, it's Sunday morning on Super Bowl Sunday. What could you be out doing right now? You could be sleeping in because it's going to be a long night. You could be getting ready for your Super Bowl parties. You could be figuring out which bar you want to go to. There could be 1,000 other things you could be doing right now instead of sitting in church listening to me. There's a lot of other things that are probably more entertaining from a worldly, fleshly perspective, right? So you're always left with these questions. You will always have the option to embrace this world or to embrace God. That's the battle of faith. That's what faith is in a nutshell. Do I believe God at his word, and is it more valuable than everything else I see? And when we meet atheists at the end of the book, guess what atheist is exactly questioning Christian on that front? Is this worthwhile, Christian? All the pain that you're enduring, all the things that you have to go through, is it worthwhile? That's exactly what he's going to ask later on. Okay? So this is a question that Christian has, and he says, well, I've got armor for my front, but if I turn my back, he'll just hit me with an arrow and I'll be dead, so I guess I better stay. So there's kind of two things that are kind of interesting. First, there's the fact that he decides to stand. And that's encouraging, right? He decides, I'm going to go ahead and battle, which is great. What's his other problem? Yeah. How brave is Christian's courage at this point? Why does he stand?
Because he has to.
Yeah. Because the alternative is worse. Right? So in some ways, you're kind of like, oh, all right, way to stand. And somebody, you're like, you're kind of a wimp. All right. Right? So he's going to stand, but he's only going to stand because he has to. Now think about this, though. Remember, this is Christian who, at the Palace Beautiful, was like, I guess I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go. And they're like, no, hold back. No, I really think I ought to go. And they have to hold him back, right? He's the one who always thinks that he's ready. He's the one who, remember he had the house of the interpreter where he saw the man cutting and slashing and hacking through all the weird creatures to get across the bridge. And he was like, I know what that means, with a big smile on his face. And now when it comes down to him having to do the battle, now all of a sudden he's kind of weakly standing there with his armor, kind of like, all right, I guess I'll get the shield out. And he's kind of holding it and getting ready. He doesn't really understand, and now is that trial of realizing what you have and what you don't. He realizes what he doesn't. He knows he doesn't have armor for his back. But does he realize what has been given to him? Does he realize the shield of faith that he has, the helmet, the shoes of the gospel, the sword of the Spirit? He doesn't understand the power that's been granted to him. He doesn't understand that God is with him everywhere he goes. So he stands, but he stands meekly, okay? Not in the full confidence. So this is going to help him with humility. Remember, this is humility. Humility is not just telling you how bad you are. Humility is realizing who you actually are in reality. He is God's chosen son. He is a member of the royal family. He has the power of God with him if he wants it.
Who you are and who you are not, both, right?
That's humility. Absolutely. That's Galatians. As we went through Galatians, Paul's trying to tell the Galatians, think about who you are. You are heirs of Christ. He has died for you. You are not those that are 90% there and 10% left. You don't have to go fulfill the law to finish off your salvation. Christ has already paid it all. So Galatians 5, therefore, if you are these people, then what should you do? Go act like those people. Go love like those people. Go have fruits of the Spirit as if you are an heir with Christ. Go be who you are. That's Paul's lesson in a number of different epistles. If you have put faith in Christ, then this is who you are. This is how God has transformed you. Now go be who you are. That's humility. That's humility. Okay? All right, let's keep going, because I'm taking way too long. So he went on, and Apollyon met him. Now I like the fact that Apollyon comes right at him. Okay, there's no doubt what's going to happen. So he went on, and Apollyon met him. Now the monster was hideous to behold, and he was clothed with scales, like a fish, and they were his pride. He had wings like a dragon, feet like a bear, and out of his belly came fire and smoke, and his mouth was as the mouth of a lion. Now, all those pictures come from different places of different creatures. The idea of being hideous comes from Daniel 7. The creature was exceedingly dreadful, with its teeth of iron and its nails of bronze, which devoured, broke in pieces, and trampled the residue with its feet. The scales is reminiscent of the Leviathan in Job 41. The feet of a bear could be referencing Revelation 13. And where it was said, "Who is like the beast who is able to make war with? Who is able to make war with him?" The mouth of a lion is again Revelation 13, fearsome jaws, and then the dragon could be from Revelation 12. Again, this is a creature that was sent out specifically to destroy the world. So, as you look at this, we're talking about dragons, bears. We're talking about Leviathan. All these crazy creatures. What ties them all together? Bunyan's grabbing from Daniel and from Revelation and all these other different places. What ties them together? As you think about all these creatures that we just mentioned, tell me some aspects of what comes to your mind as you think about them. For the same reason that God uses them in his prophecies. What are they? They're what?
Predators.
Predators? Yes, very fierce. But keep going. Destruction. And what about Leviathan? Why does Leviathan kind of gets is a decent chunk of time in Job? What was it about Leviathan that was important? He's massive. Let's keep developing that. He's big. He's huge. What frightens him? Nothing. Why? What? His size. Nothing's bigger than him. And so what does his role become? Dominance. Dominance. As we look at the dragon, as we look at the weird thing with the feet of a bear, and we look at all these different things with the razor sharp teeth, the idea is a dominant, destructive force that's not afraid of anything in creation. When it comes to man, it just scoffs and brushes him away. He's bigger than everything that we can imagine. That's the picture in all of those prophecies of these creatures. They are fearsome, they are destructive, and there's nothing that man can do to withhold them. And if they would like to, in most of these pictures, they will destroy God too if they could. Right? But that's where the limit always is. That is, as destructive and fearsome as they are never bigger than God. They are plenty bigger than man, and they disregard man like he's nothing. Okay? But they can't be bigger than God. So that's the picture here. Apollyon, that's why Bunyan grabs from all these pictures. That's the picture he wants to get us, that he wants us to get for Apollyon, that this is bigger than us. It's not bigger than God, but it's bigger than us. It's fearsome, it's frightening, it really puts us in our place. Okay, so that's what he's coming after as they come through it. And just as importantly, this Apollyon is given permission to make war with the people of the earth. That's the other thing that comes together as we put these pictures together. So, he hates Christian, he hates God, he's going to try to destroy the Christian with whatever power he has. Now, when he had come up to Christian, he beheld him with a disdainful countenance, and thus began to question with him, "Whence come you, and whither are you bound?" Christian says, "I am come from the city of destruction, which is the place of all evil, and I am going to the city of Zion." Now you gotta like Christian, as he stands cowering with his shield, he at least is honest. He doesn't pussyfoot around on the, "I'm coming from the city of destruction, which is the place of all evil." Oh, okay, that narrows it down. "By this I perceive thou art one of my subjects. For all that country is mine, and I am the prince and God of it. How is it then that thou hast run away from thy king? Were it not that I hope you mayest do me more service, I would strike thee now at one blow to the ground." Now, there's a couple statements that are made there, and Bunyan's actually pretty clever in how he does some of these things. First of all, he says, "I perceive that you are one of my subjects, for the country is mine, and I am prince and God of it." Is he accurate?
Who said that?
Apollyon.
I'd say yes.
Think about the temptation. When Satan took Jesus to the top of the temple, what did he do? "You see all this land? I will give it all to you." What was he indicating? That he owned it. Is that true?
He's called the prince of the power of the air.
Uh-huh.
The god of this world.
Right. And what was he able to do to Job?
He was able to, take everything except his life.
Yep. So he does have a significant amount of power, right?
Within the confines of what God's given him.
True. Does he own the land?
I would say no.
No, he doesn't. Does he think he owns the land? Yeah. Big difference, right? But so he says, "I am the prince and the God of it, and you are one of my subjects." Now, is that correct? Does that actually matters? Are the people of the world the subjects of Satan?
But the wonder of Christianity is that the subjects of the world die.
Right.
And in their place are resurrected.
So when you say they're subjects of Satan, are they willingly giving? Is God giving them over to Satan and said, "Satan, you are king of them"? Or have they willingly put themselves under the kingdom of Satan? Do you see the difference?
Chosen to follow the prince's will.
Yeah. So you see how Apollyon likes to twist subtle facts into things that make it seem like he's in a lot more powerful control. "I am the prince and the God of this land." Is that because God just lets you rule over it for the time being? 6 of one, half dozen of another, tomato, tomato, whatever. I'm the prince and God of it, right? And you are one of my subjects. No, I'm not one of your subjects. I just followed you because I willingly gave myself to you for a season, right? And that's where Christian comes. Christian reads this. He's very smart. I was born indeed in your dominions, but your service was hard, and your wages such a man could not live on, for the wages of sin is death. Therefore, when I was come to years, when I realized it, when I came out of my ignorance, I did as other considerate persons do, look out if perhaps I might mend myself. I realize that this is bad news, that you're bad news, and I came out from under your dominance. Now notice what he says. This is what Apollyon says. Were it not that that I hope you could serve me more, I would strike thee now with one blow. Okay, let's go back to Job. Could he really strike down Christian at that moment? Does he have the power to do so? Yes. Could he really do so?
Only if God willed it.
Only if God willed it, right? Why didn't he put the little caveat in there? See, this is what I like about the way Bunyan keeps describing Apollyon. He's smart. He knows how to state his case in a way that leaves out just the right amount of detail to make his position seem very, very... He's not lying entirely, right? He knows what he's doing. So Christian stands his ground and says, no, I'm coming out from under you. Apollyon says, there is no prince that will thus lightly lose his subjects, neither will I lose thee. One other thing that'll help us too. We wouldn't get it because when we come and go, right? When we want to go to a different town, we just get in our car and we drive down to the Colorado Springs, and nobody thinks gives us a second thought. At this time, if you were a subject of a king and you wanted to leave the realm, guess what you had to ask for? Permission. You were property of the king. And so when he says, what are you doing out here? He's literally saying, you're doing something illegal. I didn't give you permission to leave. So Christian's actually standing up and saying, I don't need your permission to come. So that's actually something else. So just think about that one a little bit. That one's a little bit out of our cultural norm. So there's no prince that will thus lose his subjects, neither will I lose thee. But since you complainest of my service and wages, be content to go back, what our country will afford, and I do here promise to give thee. So basically he says, okay, well, if you didn't like the way it was, how about this? Now, first of all, what did he promise to do if he didn't like Christian's answer? Yeah. And why didn't he do so? Because he can't, right? You see how you like to breathe out a lot of threats, but you can't go any further? Keep that in mind as we get to the giant of despair, of doubting castle. But, so he doesn't strike him down. Instead, he tries to reason with him. How about this? If you go back, I will give you blessing. So now what does he do? Before it was kind of, let me try to scare you into going back. Now what's his tactic? I'm going to tempt you to go back. I'm going to tell you. Now, this is Satan. He's described as a deceiver. How much weight should you put into what he just said? Again, you always leave out just enough detail to make it sound good without actually, if you just embrace it.
I like the caveat he gives, what our country will afford, I promise to give you. So we can give you whatever we can afford.
Yeah, whatever I will afford.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But I have let myself to another, says Christian, even to the king of princes. And how can I, with fairness, go back with thee? And Apollyon says this, thou hast done in this, according to the proverb, changed a bad for a worse. But it is ordinary for those who have professed themselves his servants, after a while to give him the slip, and return again to me. Do so now, and all shall be well. So what's that supposed to mean? Nobody really sticks with this. I mean, come on, man. A good religion, it's good for you, but we all know that nobody really wants to do this their whole life, right? So let's just cut to the end, right? Just go back. You're going to give up anyways. He's trying to discourage him. You're not going to make it anyways, so just give up now. Now, Christian's standing there, shaking in fear, thinking about going back. How would this tempt him? He's already kind of frightened, right? He's already kind of unsure about himself. And here's Satan kind of just Apollyon confirming his own fears. So he could turn back. This is all different tactics. One is just outright fear. One is bribery. One is the seed of doubt. You see how Apollyon's just taking different tactics to try to get Christian to yield. Christian says, I have given him, God, my faith and sworn my allegiance to him. How then can I go back from this and not be hanged as a traitor? I've already said I'm going to do this. I have to follow through on this. It's a beautiful thing to have consistent perseverance. You may not be perfect, but you're going to press forward. And that's really the heart of faith. Apollyon said, "Thou didst the same to me, and yet I am willing to pass by all if now thou wilt return again and go back. You were one of my subjects, and you decided to leave me. Hypocrite." Right? What I promised thee was in my nonage. That means when I was younger, when I was kind of ignorant, before I grew up and understood more about the world. That's the idea. "And besides, I count the prince under whose banner now I stand is able to absolve me, yea, and to pardon also what I did as to my compliance with thee. And besides, O thou destroying Apollyon, to speak the truth, I like his service, his wages, his servants, his government, his company, and country better than thine, and therefore leave off to persuade me further. I am his servant, and I will follow him." So, this was the man who was thinking about turning back, who was meekly sitting there behind his shield, shaking. Now what does it sound like? What's happening? As he's standing, he's getting stronger. As he stands and witnesses to the truth, guess what's infusing him with power? Guess what's getting him to stand strong? Recollecting who he serves. Recollecting what the power is available to him. Remembering the gospel and what that did to him, how it transformed him, the freeing power of the gospel. That's what he's starting to see. And that's what he's standing up to Apollyon and saying. Now, Apollyon isn't stupid. Apollyon knows his path. Do you think this is the first Christian that's ever explained the gospel to Apollyon? Of course not. He knows the gospel better than we do. That's why he knows how to twist it. It's hard to twist things when you don't know them. If you really know the terms of the deal, that's when you're dangerous. Apollyon says this, "Consider again, when thou art in cool blood," so he knows that Christian's starting to get stronger. So calm down there. Think about this. "What art thou like to meet with in the way that thou goest? Thou knowest that for the most part his servants come to an ill end because they are transgressors against me in my ways." What is he telling him?
You're going to die. Think about what's going to happen to you.
You know what's going to happen to you because, remember what he says, his servants come to an ill end because they are transgressors against me and my ways. How do I know that your end is going to be bad? Because I'm going to make it bad. I'm going to come against you. And is he right? Yeah. What has happened in persecution? Who do we see Christians die? In martyrdom, absolutely. In terrible ways, right? Satan wins the battle, even though he loses the war. Okay? And that's what he's trying to get him to remember. Remember how I win these battles. How many of them have been put to a shameful death. And besides, thou countest his service better than mine, whereas he never came yet from the place where he is to deliver any that served him out of their hands. But as for me, how many times, as all the world very well knows, have I delivered, like this, either by power or fraud, those that have faithfully served me from him and his, though taken by them, and so I deliver thee. Now, two things. First of all, he wants to doubt and he wants to exalt himself. The first thing he brings doubt in is what? How many times has there been a martyr who has been burned at the stake, and what happened? They died. They were burned at the stake. Where was he? Did he ever come to rescue them? How many of those people were rescued? I thought this was the God of all power, and yet he lets his servants die at my hands? How powerful is he? Now, let's talk about all the people that were in his service that I rescued, that I took out, that they were kind of in trials, they were having difficult circumstances, and then through power or fraud, I like that, through power or fraud, I delivered them. Do you see how he's doing this? Look at the way that I've helped him. He's trying to exalt himself by and cast down on God. Christian says, his forbearing at present to deliver them is on purpose to try their love, whether they will cleave to him to the end. Okay, so Christian immediately cuts through all that and says, no, he did this for a reason. He let them die, not because he doesn't love them, but so that they can be refined. He fully believes this. This is the testimony of faith. And as for the ill end that thou sayest they come to, that is most glorious in their account, for for present deliverance they do not much expect it, for they stay for their glory, and then they shall have it, when their prince comes in his and the glory of the angels. So it doesn't sway Christian. Christian knows that his treasure is in heaven, not here on earth. So God's failure, or apparent failure, to deliver his saints is not because they screwed up or he screwed up. It's to give them so much more than what they can see. Okay? Apollyon says, thou hast already been unfaithful. Now this actually gets Christian. Christian's growing in power. He's fighting the devil. He's rebuking the devil. He's just swinging left and right. You can see him starting to bring it on the 1-2s, right? Bring it on. Here we go. But Apollion's not dumb. Thou hast already been unfaithful in thy service to him, and hast thou not? And how dost thou think to receive wages of him? Christian says, where in Apollyon have I been unfaithful to him? Now this is important. Okay. Apollyon says, thou didst faint at the first setting out, when thou wast almost choked at the gulf of despond. Thou didst attempt wrong ways to be rid of thy burden, whereas against thou shouldest have stayed till thy prince had taken it off. Thou didst sinfully sleep and lose thy choice thing. Thou wast also almost persuaded to go back at the sight of the lions. And when thou talkest of thy journey and what thou hast heard and seen, thou art inwardly desirous of vainglory in all that you sayest or doest. So what does he bring up?
Every mistake he made.
Huh?
Every mistake.
Every mistake he made. Now, why is that disarming?
Shows weakness.
It shows weakness, but keep going. Who does he tell him that he's a sinner? Yes. But more than that, what does he tell him?
He's trying to say those things are because he's unfaithful to his king.
He's saying that they're because they're unfaithful, and they are. They're screwed up, right? They screw-ups. They were momentary lapses in judgment, lapses of faith. There were moments of disbelief when Christian tried to do it himself, when he tried to take his own wisdom as guidance. But even more than that, Apollyon takes real, actual elements of Christian's life and puts it in front of him. These aren't broad brushstrokes about how all men are sinful. These aren't saying things are, you're just not perfect. He's taking Christian's actual screw-ups and throwing them into his face. Answer this one for me. Answer this one for me. What about that time? What about this time? What about that time when you screwed up and you yelled at your kids? What about this time when you were so angry with your wife? What about that time when you were at work and you should have done this, but you did that? See what he does? And this, he waits till the end. Christian sitting there with the body blows coming in, and now what does he do to disarm him? He puts his own life in front of him. What's the answer to how strong you are? Look how weak you are. That takes the rug right out of your feet, doesn't it? Because what are your answers? What do you have to say when that's put in front of you?
Guilty,
Right.
Yeah.
Guilty but forgiven.
Yeah. And so let's see what Christian says. Christian says, all this is true and much more which thou hast left out. I like that. You forgot a few details. Luther said, when I go to bed, the devil is always waiting for me. When he begins to plague me, I give him the answer, devil, I must sleep. That's God's command. Work by day, sleep by night, so go away. If that doesn't work, he brings out a catalog of sins, and I say, yes, old fellow, I know all about them. And I know some more which you have overlooked. Here are a few extra. Put them down. If he still won't quit and presses me hard, he accuses me as a sinner, I scorn him and say, physician, heal thyself. I don't have any room for your service. So Christian says, much more which has left out, but the prince whom I serve and honor is merciful and ready to forgive. But besides these infirmities possess me in thy country, for there I sucked them in, and I have groaned under them, been sorry for them, and have obtained pardon from my prince. The body blows stop a little bit when he realizes who it's about, but he doesn't stop clinging to the cross. The gospel is the thing that keeps him going. Dan?
There's a pastor I've read who calls this the bingo defense. As a pastor, when people would come and attack him and say, you know, you do this, you do this, you do this, he says, bingo!
Mm-hmm. It's true.
It's true, I'm a sinner.
Yeah.
I've done these things and forgot stuff. You love
Yeah,
stuff.
I know. Let me add a few more to your list.
But
Right.
the gospel.
Exactly. It's the same thing with evangelism. I'm not trying to make you a follower of me. I'm trying to make you a follower of Jesus. So as you find all the faults of me, that's fine. I don't really care. Go deal with your God. That's the one you got to deal with. Then Apollyon broke out into a grievous rage, saying, I am an enemy to this prince. I hate his person, his laws, and people. I am come out on purpose to withstand thee. All right, now we finally have the unmasking. This is over. We're just going to end this right now. And so now he's just done. He breaks into a grievous rage when he hears that Christian has been pardoned. When sin is no longer dominant over Christian, what does that effectively do to Satan's power? Breaks it. Because the power of sin is death. The power of sin is this fear of death. The fact that Satan can sit there and rule over sinful man, and then all of a sudden God takes someone out of the domain of sin and puts them into the domain of grace. He's just slashing it in Satan's face, and he hates it. He hates that God would do something like this. And so finally, with that pardon, with that mercy revealed, and with Christian unwielding, all of a sudden now Apollion's really angry. So he breaks out into a grievous rage, and he declares himself an enemy. And Christian says, Apollyon, this is great, beware what you do, for I am in the king's highway, the way of holiness. Therefore, take heed to yourself. So remember, this was the guy that was sitting there shaking. And now all of a sudden, his rebuke, he is rebuking Satan. Not in our charismatic sense of our modern generation. He's not saying, I rebuke you, Satan. He's going to Apollyon and saying, just remember who you're fighting if you come against me. Just remember whose highway this is. And you come against me, you're coming against God. And this is, you can just see him shaking his finger in Apollyon's face. Get ready. Now, the only problem here is, what has he done to prepare himself for battle? Nothing. That's the answer. He stood shaking in his boots. Now he's gotten strength, which is good. He's gotten strength by remembering the pardon, by remembering the mercy, by remembering the gospel. The problem is he's still standing there against a creature that's far larger, far more powerful than him. You got to think here, okay? You got to count the cost. Don't just run into battle ready. Okay, and that's where Christian is failing at the moment. But you got to love the confidence. Then Apollyon straddled quite over the breadth of the way and said, I am void of fear in this matter. Prepare thyself to die, for I swear by my infernal den that thou shalt go no further. Here will I spill thy soul. So as he straddles the way, what is he showing? Remember he said, this is the king's highway. And so what does Apollyon do? Yeah, what's he trying to say? Huh? I'm bigger than the highway. I'm dominating the highway. I own this, right? Ongoing, I will spill your blood. And with that, he threw a flaming dart at his breast. But Christian had a shield in his hand with which he caught it, and so prevented the danger of that. Now, a flaming dart. Think of it more a flaming arrow. Okay, so what they used to do, and you see this in movies, is they would take an arrow with some kind of cotton or whatever, and they would dip it in pitch, which is a mixture of oil and tar. They'd light it on fire, and they'd fire at whatever structure. What was the point? Why would they do that? Light it on fire. Now remember, when they would go against these castles and things, they would have to ram through a wall if they wanted to try to break in. So they wouldn't do that, because that would take a really long time. So what you do is you take these arrows and you light them on fire and you shoot them over the walls inside. What would that do? It would light what on fire? Mm-hmm.
The homes or whatever's inside there.
Right. Or more specifically, the foundation. And instead of having to ram through the walls, what would happen to the city? Crumble from the inside. Right? That's the idea. I'm going to burn you out from the inside. So he takes a flaming dart and he aims it at Christian's breast. What's he aiming for? His heart. So what is the dart? That's the question. What is the dart and how would it work with Christian's heart? Think about that.
Trying to break his spirit
By
by destroying
Yes. And how would you do that? How can Satan do that? By?
The shield of faith is to extinguish the fiery darts of the evil one. So
Right.
the defense against the idea of the dart is to destroy one's faith, and the shield of faith prevents that from happening. And so
True.
It destroys. The idea of the dart is to destroy one's confidence in God.
Right. What are the darts, though? You are correct. You guys are absolutely correct. The shield protects you. It is to destroy their faith. It is to destroy their heart. It is to... What does Satan use to sow the seeds of doubt? What's the most effective way to get us to doubt God's faithfulness? Trials and temptations. He can't come and destroy us. God won't let him. So instead, what does he try to do? Get you to destroy you. I'm going to send a fiery temptation at you. Now, what does that look like? It really doesn't matter. It could be different for each one of us. It could be flaming the fires of jealousy. It could be stoking your anger. It could be lighting up your passion and lust. It really doesn't matter. He will pick the appropriate temptation that will effectively destroy you, if it could. Right? That's what he's aiming for. He's aiming to burn you out. He's aiming to burn you from the inside down. He wants you to give up on your faith. He wants you to destroy yourself. Because he can't do it himself, necessarily. So he's firing these darts of temptation. Whatever it is that will kill you, he's picking it out of his quiver and aiming for your heart. Fortunately, Christian uses the shield of faith to be able to deflect the dart, right? And so he prevented the danger of that. Great, battle's over, right? Nope. While that one was getting lit and fired, guess what Apollyon was doing with the other 10? Lighting them up. Here we go. Then did Christian draw. What did he just draw? His sword. When did he draw his sword?
After the fight started.
After the fight started. Okay? When you go into battle, you don't sit there with your safety on, waiting for the battle to go underway, right? It's only in the movies where they say, wait for them to fire before we do. No. You go into battle ready to fight. When a policeman pulls his gun, he knows he will have to fire this. He is fully prepared to fire it. He doesn't pull his gun as an intimidation. He pulls his gun ready to shoot. He prays he doesn't have to, but he's ready to shoot, right? So Christian, when he met Apollyon, what should have been his first movement? Draw a sword. Instead, he waits until he has to deflect a dart before he realizes that he has a sword. You see in Christian's unpreparedness. So he draws his sword, finally. And Apollyon as fast made at him, throwing darts as thick as hail, by which, notwithstanding all that Christian could do to avoid it, Apollyon wounded him in his head, his hand, and his foot. And we'll talk about it in a second. But what happened as Christian pulls his sword out, is Apollyon afraid? Nope. Because pulling your sword out means what? Absolutely nothing. It really doesn't matter. What do you have to do with your sword to make it effective? Use it. Now the sword, it would have been a sword that what Paul had in mind, and what Bunyan had in mind too, was generally not considered, it's not Princess Bride, where they're going to go up and down, fencing and everything else, right? It's also not the big broadsword that you would necessarily see in Life of Brian, in a Holy Grail with the Black Knight, where they have a gigantic sword. Okay, are these visuals enough for you guys? They're helping me a lot. This would have been kind of a shorter sword, almost longer than a dagger, more machete-ish size, right? So, and I'm not going to come up with a movie with a machete. So they would come out with a sword about this big. Now, a sword this big is only good for what? Close quarters combat. That's what Paul had in mind. So when the Romans would have rushed into their army, they would have had a shield that generally was fairly large. It would have covered most of their height. That's the shield of faith. Their sword, however, would have been short, because what they do is they lock shields. You hear Ken use that term. They would literally kind of stand next to each other, shield on shield, and they would just keep pushing forward through the battle. And then as they broke the lines, that's when they would open up and start hacking people right there. Does that make sense? So the shield, the sword, is made for close quarters combat. So so Apollyon is rushing, knowing that Christian is only yielding a short sword, so you can come pretty close to him. Second, he's also not really aware of whether Christian knows how to use the sword. For all he knows, he's just pulling out his Bible and saying, I've got my Bible. But if you don't know what it says, it really doesn't matter, right? The book itself is not a defense. The words of the book are eternal defense. So, so Apollyon comes hard at him. He keeps firing these temptations. So Christian's under this season where it's just coming over and over. He's just getting pounded with temptation. And eventually it hits his head, his hand, and his foot. That would be the helmet of salvation, his hand that held a sword, and the foot and his feet are the shoes of the gospel. Okay? We don't have time to go through it, but you guys can get the picture of what's going on there. This made Christian give a little back. Apollyon therefore followed his work amain, and Christian again took courage and resisted as manfully as he could. This sore combat lasted for above half a day, even till Christian was almost quite spent. For you must know that Christian, by reason of his wounds, must needs grow weaker and weaker. So you can read more. There's plenty more in detail in here, but we don't have time to go over it. What's happening to Christian? Is he defending himself? Is he doing his best to keep hold of the things that he knows and keep hold of his faith? But what's happening? As these temptations continue to rain down on him, what's creeping in? Down. He's losing his grasp on the shoes of the gospel. He's losing his grasp on the word. He's losing his grasp on salvation. He can't, these temptations are having their fruit of sowing the seeds of doubt in his heart. Okay? Just as Apollyon intended. Then Apollyon, espying his opportunity, began to gather up close to Christian, and wrestling with him gave him a dreadful fall. So that means that finally, as Christian stands there, he finds just the situation that's going to make Christian finally really doubt his faith. He gives him a dreadful fall, but with that, Christian's sword flew out of his hand. Okay? So now Christian's lying on the ground. You picture him lying on the ground, Apollyon standing over him, ready to just pound him right there, and Christian sitting there saying, I don't know what I'm going to do. This is the end. Okay? Remember, this is the Valley of Humiliation. What's the lesson that Christian has to learn? How strong he is and how strong he isn't. What has he found out? Christian can deal with quite a bit, right? He knows how to use his weapons. He knows how to use his armor. But ultimately, he's not invincible. He's not invincible. Apollyon figured out the way to get up next to him. Apollyon figured out what it was necessary to sweep his legs and get him on the ground helpless. Right? He knows exactly what to do, and now Christian's sword flies out of his hand. Then said Apollyon, I am sure of thee now. And with that, he did almost press him to death, so that Christian began to despair of life. Okay, so now he's got him. He's got him right where he wants him. Sorry, my throat's giving out. Now, at this point, if you guys have ever seen the movie The Incredibles, do you remember what happened as Syndrome catches Mr. Incredible? Mr. Incredible kind of starts sneaking over here to try to grab a rock and throw it at him.
Monologuing.
You sly dog. You caught me monologuing, right? If you ever seen that scene, I thought it was... Okay, it's a good movie. If you haven't seen it, go see it. It's great. It's a great kids movie. But there's a scene where basically he sits there telling him about his evil plan and what makes his motivation so evil and how he's going to do this. And Mr. Incredible tries to capitalize on his monologuing. Well, this is almost exactly what happens here. Apollyon standing over him, telling him how he's going to make an end to him. And as he does that, he puffs out his chest and gets ready for the final blow. Christian saying, I don't know what I'm going to do. But as God would have it, who's been watching everything that's been unfolding? Who knows exactly how it's going to unfold? Who has the timing down to the second of when Apollyon's going to puff out his chest? As God would have it, one of the favorite phrases of the book, and as God would have it, while Apollyon was fetching of his last blow, thereby to make a full end of this good man, Christian nimbly reached out his hand for his sword, and caught it, saying, Rejoice not against me, own mine enemy. When I fall, I shall arise. Okay? So he's sitting there. He doesn't know what to do. He puts his arms down, and guess what he finds right next to him? His sword, right? Has God been anywhere but right next to this man this whole time? Did it feel like God was anywhere but right next to this man this whole time? Yeah. He felt like he was a million miles away. But at just the right time, God comes to him. And guess where he finds his strength? In his sword. What is a sword? God's word. Where did he find his strength? In God's word. Exactly where he should find it. Rejoice not over me comes from Psalm... I don't remember. Anyways, he quotes a psalm, and with that he gave him a deadly thrust, which made him, Apollyon, give back as one that had received his mortal wound. So you see the picture that Bunyan's painting. Christian's dead to rights. Apollyon has him. He reaches out at God's bidding, finds his sword, remembers the words of Scripture, remembers the power of God, remembers what God has for him, takes that sword and just plunges it into Apollyon and pushes Apollyon back. Apollyon has no answer for this. He falls back as one received a mortal wound. Christian, perceiving that, made at him again, saying, "Nay, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him that loved us." So you can see him almost like in The Princess Bride, where he gets up and he starts calling him and saying, "My name is Inigo Montoya," right? This is what he's looking like. Christian kind of reaches up and he's got his hand on a wound. He's bleeding, but he's now got that strength coming at him. And so he remembers another verse. This one's from Romans 8, that we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. And he pulls up his sword. You can just imagine his sword now has Apollyon's blood kind of dripping off of it. And Apollyon's taking a couple of steps back as Christian's starting to come at him. Not in his own strength. He doesn't have it in him. Just like that picture in The Princess Bride. He's still kind of wounded and sort of weak, but now what's giving him strength is not himself, but God's word. And with that, Apollyon spread forth his dragon's wings. Now, the dragon's wings were a symbol of strength before. They were a fearsome symbol that he was bigger than man. And now what are his dragon's wings used for? Sped him away. And that for Christian, for a season, saw him no more. So those things that made him so fearsome were the exact same things that allowed him to run and flee. Okay? So that's the picture we have. It was God's word that wins the day for Christian. It is him embracing what God has said for him. It is him embracing the sword of the Spirit, God's word, embracing it and defending himself against Apollyon. It isn't to say Apollyon isn't powerful. It is to say that with God's power, Christian became more powerful. But not until God would have it. Okay. Spurgeon said, "It is written, stand upon it. And if the devil were 50 devils in one, he could not overcome you. On the other hand, if you leave it is written, Satan knows more about reasoning than you do. He is far older, has studied mankind very thoroughly, and knows all our weak points. Therefore, the contest will be an unequal one. Do not argue with him, but wave in his face the banner of God's word. Satan cannot endure the infallible truth, for it is death to the falsehood of which he is the father." In this combat, no man can imagine, unless he had seen and heard as I did, what yelling and hideous roaring Apollyon made all the time that he fight. He spake like a dragon, and on the other side with sighs and groans burst from Christian's heart. I never saw him all the while give so much as one pleasant look, till he perceived he had wounded Apollyon with his two-edged sword. Then indeed he did smile and look upward, but it was the most dreadful sight that I ever saw. So you think about the idea that the yelling and hideous roaring that Apollyon made. Now, how much injury does yelling and roaring make? None. Right? It's kind of like smoke. It's kind of like thunder. How much damage does thunder do? None, right? Thunder is just a noise, boys. Lightning does the work. That's the old country song. Nobody ever knows that song. Nobody ever does. It's a good song, actually. It's dumb, but it's a good country song, like most country songs. Right? So all this yelling was to kind of obscure the fact that Christian actually had all this power available to him. Half of a battle, half of our trials is trying to cut through what's real and what's just noise. What makes it seem worse than it is? Can we see the nugget of what's true amongst all the other things that are going around us? How many of our trials are worse because we make them worse? Because we imagine them to be worse than they actually are, right? Doesn't make them less trials, but it will make them less severe, generally. Okay? But Christian had to fight through this. He did, and it was the most dreadful sight, Bunyan never said. So when the battle was over, Christian said, I will here give thanks to him that delivered me out of the mouth of the lion, to him that did help me against Apollyon. So he did, saying, Great Beelzebub, the captain of this fiend, designed my ruin, therefore to this end. He sent him harnessed out, and he with rage that hellish was did fiercely me engage. But blessed Michael helped me, and I, by dint of sword, did quickly make him fly. So the idea of Michael, I thought was really weird. In Puritan theology in general, Michael was considered to be a pre-incarnate Christ. So when you saw the angel Michael referenced, that was actually picturing Christ. So he's not actually giving praise to Michael the archangel. He's giving praise to Christ. That's the idea. Okay. But blessed Michael helped me, and I, by dint of sword, did quickly make him fly. Therefore to him let me give lasting praise, and thank and bless his holy name always. Then there came to him a hand with some of the leaves of the tree of life, which Christian took and applied to the wounds he had received in battle, and he was healed immediately. He also sat down in that place to eat bread and to drink the bottle that was given to him a little before. So being refreshed, he addressed himself to his journey with his sword drawn in his hand, for he said, I know not, but some other enemy may be at hand. But he met with no other affront from Apollyon quite through the rest of the valley. So he figures that out. God heals him. God receives his wounds. He's got all these things from his friends that help him. Remember, discretion, piety, all those qualities. They come back to him. They strengthen him again. And this time, how does he walk? All right. Now I've got it figured out. Now, you'd think that would help him, right? We're going to go into the valley of the shadow of death. And guess what he's going to face with? What's the two ways that temptation can come? With Apollyon, how did it come to him? Straight on. I'm going to fire my darts. You're going to see them coming. Everything else. What's the other way that temptation can come? Subtly, quietly, spookily, when you're not expecting it from behind.
When you're weakest.
When you're weakest. When you're not looking for it. Right? Those are the harder ones. And we'll see it next week. The sword in hand is great, but the sword only works when you actually have something that you can swing it at. How do you deal with the fact that some things are much harder trials to deal with because they don't come straight from the front? They come from the sides, they come from behind. Half of them are imagined. How do you think through this? Okay? So that's going to be the valley of the shadow of death. We'll do that next week. Questions? Sorry to keep you for so long.